Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Danes Walker here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannesson from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Only 4 players left to go in the 50 most relevant, and one of them is Western Bulldogs' Jackson Macrae. Over the past couple of years especially, he has been one of, if not the best midfielder available for us over the 2 years. And entering into 2020, it certainly does look like business as usual for Jackson Macrae. To chat about him today, I got Jimmy back. Hello, mate.
Hello, MJ. Hello, listeners.
It's nice to have you back. Just the 25 years old, this Western Bulldog midfielder. And boy, oh boy, when he gets cracking, there are not many that can keep up with him. Last year, his best score in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam was against the Collingwood Footy Club. It was a 180, while in SuperCoach, not as high as ceiling, but you'll see maybe a little bit more frequency through there. 155 against the Lions. He's going to be priced at an average point in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam of 115, while it's a 123 in SuperCoach. In that format, he's going to set you back just under $670,000. In AFL Fantasy, a touch over $850K, while around about $14,000 beneath $850K, which, to save you the maths, $836,000, just because I want to be a jerk. Jimmy, when we talk about Jackson Macrae, it was just another year of, for the most part, incredible consistency, durability, and if you owned him for the most part or all of the year, you would have been very happy with the returns of Jackson Macrae.
Oh, absolutely, and those prices are there for a reason. He scored well, and he did it most weeks. There are only a handful of occasions where he didn't hit an acceptable mark, so to speak, for want of a better word. And and every so often his ceiling more than made up for his downfall. So it's if you had him all year, fantastic. Well done to you. He put up a pretty good average, even if that was a little less than the year before. You certainly couldn't complain.
Yeah, it's true. 34 possessions he averaged last year. 21 of them were uncontested, so has no problem getting on the outside of the ball. And went at a pretty reasonable efficiency, 74%. He averaged 7th for score involvements across the entire AFL, 5th for tackles. Had averaged 7 score involvements, not 7th in the entire competition. 5th for tackles, 5 clearances, 4 inside 50s across the league. This is where he was at his strongest. Is he ranked finishing 2nd for total disposals, 2nd for uncontested possessions, and 6th for goal assists, 18th for tackles, 11th for contested possessions. He could get it done on the inside and the outside. It's no surprise. He got himself All-Australian honours, was top 3 in his club's best and fairest, and finished 8th in the Brownlow medal last year. You do, Jimmy, talk about that AFL Fantasy ceiling and that SuperCoach ceiling. Last year, another really strong year. That average of 115 in AFL Fantasy comprised of just 2 scores beneath 80 all year, and one of them, in fact both of them, came when Beveridge was doing Bevo things and experimenting with the lineup. Across the whole year, though, 17 tons, 9 of them converted into 120s, and a couple of monster 150s, including that 180-plus score.
That's it. And to go back to what you said there, Bevo does do Bevo things. And that's a thing that we do need to be mindful of when picking Macrae or Dunkley or Bont or anyone else, is that there's no certainty week to week of what that role is going to be. By and large, when you find something that he thinks is working, he'll stick with it. But it was only a couple of years ago that Macrae was averaging a solid 110 little run for us, and then Bevo dropped him because he wasn't doing the things he wanted. So it's those fantasy numbers and even SuperCoach numbers don't necessarily translate to being good at or playing good football. And that's not to say that that's a risk in picking him, but
sure.
I guess something we've got to be mindful of is that at any given moment a role can change, and particularly at the Bulldogs is something I guess we need to bear in mind. And what we find, if I can keep running on this a bit longer, is that I think that the fantasy community as a whole loves to have someone on a pedestal. It was Dane Swan for a long time, and it was Tom Mitchell.
Tom Rockcliffe,
Rockcliffe, exactly right. And then last year, with Rockcliffe not playing the way he has for a little while, and Mitchell, of course, being out for the year, and Macrae coming off that amazing 2018 season, he was the big dog that was left and has suddenly sitting at that top level where people look at him and go, he's the player you have to have. He's going to be the number one average. He's not necessarily going to be. And I think it's easy to get carried away with. But he's also the type of player that has got pretty strong ownership numbers at the start. He's going to continue to have stronger ownership numbers as the year goes on because odds are good he's going to be in the top handful of mids. Whether he's number 1 or number 10, he's going to be there or thereabouts. So he's a player that you're going to want to own at some point. The question I think we need to ask ourselves is, are you prepared to take him on in the earlier rounds and find someone a bit cheaper that you think can match him for the first 4, 6, 10 weeks? Or is he a player that you really feel you have to start with and you don't feel comfortable if you don't have him?
It's an interesting perspective, and I'm keen to ask you some questions back on that in a moment. SuperCoach numbers, for those of you that are keen, pretty similar level of dominance, 19 tonnes, so not bad. 11 of them over 120 and 3 over 150, and just a couple of scores beneath 80 across the year on his way to an average of 123. And you do talk a little bit about that inconsistency or lack of confidence we can have sometimes in that Western Bulldogs midfield, and we did see that impact even Macrae last year. Pre-buy in AFL fantasy over the first 11 rounds, he was averaging 101. Again, perfectly fine, but if you paid for that 120 at the start, it was hurting as every week went on. In SuperCoach, again, paying in that high 120 marker was an average of 113. Again, fine, but again, you weren't quite getting the return on investment at that point in time. However, things went bananas from the bye round onwards. After the multi-bye rounds in AFL Fantasy, he received a considerable boost. He averaged an absolute monster 129 on the run home and 11 consecutive tonnes, with the lowest of them being a 106. It was pretty similar in SuperCoach as well. On the run home, 11 tonnes. The lowest was a 115. And an average of 133. So it's a little bit closer to what we saw in that 2018 season that you've alluded to, where he averaged in AFL Fantasy 122, which was included 16 tonnes, and not a bad personal best. Final round of the year score of 190. That was the one to captain him, hey? SuperCoach again in 2018, average 127, 16 tonnes. So we've now got really 2 years of data, don't we, Jimmy, to suggest that barring Bevo doing Bevo things, we've got ourselves a high 120 midfielder. But this year, there are genuine options that can go near him, aren't there?
Well, and that's the thing. And as I said, all else being equal, and it's a very broad brush to paint, but all else being equal, he is going to be in the top handful of midfielders this year, surely. He will have quiet patches, I'm sure, where he does average closer to 100 than 120. But it only takes one or two of those big 140, 150 plus scores that he can get, the 180s, 190s every so often. And that average suddenly skyrockets. And it's trying to make sure that you own him before that happens. That's the key. And if your period of ownership includes those figures and not perhaps a couple of the lower ones, then happy days. But the thing with him too is that at some point, even from the start, that's a high price tag he's got. If you don't start him, the player you're choosing instead of him isn't the one you're upgrading. You're picking a Josh Kelly or a Trelaw or a Dunkley, whoever it is. Sure. You're picking him as your M1. That's fine. It's the player towards the end of your list where you're looking at that M5, M6, M7 that you've then got to find enough cash to upgrade him to get Macrae. That's a lot of money, MJ.
It is a lot of money. And again, you bring up this interesting point that he's got arguably one of the best frequency ceilings of our midfielders, barring a Tom Mitchell, who we talked about a week ago in the 50 most relevant, and the unknowns about how he'll return. But you even just look at the numbers of him coming off the multi-buy round this year. 140, 180, 135 in AFL Fantasy, 150, 148, 142 in SuperCoach. He's shown he can put these big consistent scores. You can keep looking through the rest of the year. I'm not just picking and choosing parts of Macrae. That's what he does regularly across the past 2 years. And he's one of those guys, you're right, Jimmy. If you choose to take him on, will you get him cheaper? Possibly. But
maybe.
Can you but can you capitalize on him at his cheapest price and make it worthwhile? That's the big thing coaches are going to have to consider.
Absolutely. And for all of my playing devil's advocate up to this point, the other thing I want to highlight too is that if you're not picking Macrae, you're picking a guy that you think is going to be able to match him at there or thereabouts
Sure.
at that 15 kind of average that he's priced at. If Macrae goes on a tear from round one, picks off where he
Left
finished
off.
last year, and starts averaging the season at 120, 130 in the first 5 or 6 rounds, is the player you pick capable of matching that? Is there a player with as much upside potentially as Macrae, even given the price that you're paying for him?
Yeah.
And again, it's just part of that debate. If you're going to take him on, you want to make sure that you've got someone who can genuinely take him on, and you need a plan of how you're going to get him before he runs away from you.
That's right, because 13 weeks without Jackson Macrae. Getting him after the multi-buy round in round 14 is when the doggies are off, along with many other popular premiums, including all of the GWS players we've talked about. Tom Mitchell, there's a couple of crows through there you might be considering if you're looking for a unique option through there. Round 15, bringing Jackson Macrae in, that's a long way into the season to miss potentially one of the few candidates of the number one scoring midfielder, and there is only a few to be fair. To be without them for 13 games, that you'd get a little nervous on the edge of your seat, wouldn't you? And again, but that's on the presumption that he goes that 120, 130 like he ended the year. If he goes closer to how he started the year, happy freaking days. And that'll be the big decision that coaches have to make.
It is. It's not an easy one from my point of view, but it certainly makes for an interesting discussion. And whichever way you're going to go with it, you've just got to back yourself and, as I said, have a plan of how to get him if you don't start with him.
All right, so it sounds like he's not starting anywhere for you at the moment. Is that fair?
No, it's not actually. I have got him. It's just
Look
I'm
at
always
you being a
looking
jerk.
Oh, look, I've got to be good at something. But if a player like him, if I've got him sitting in my team, I want to look at it from the opposite point of view.
Sure.
Why don't I want him?
Yeah.
And find a reason to kick him out. And at the minute, he's looking pretty comfortable across the formats. But is this thought process, what I've gone through over the last 10 minutes, is exactly what I've been looking at in deciding whether to take him out or not. At the minute, I think the default position is I do want to start him because of what we know he can do, what he's done over a couple of years now. If I'm taking him out, I've got to have a good reason for it.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm not quite at that point yet, but I can certainly see a strong argument to be built of why you might want to bet against him in those earlier rounds and have a plan to pick him up a little bit later, whether it's at the same price or not. But if you think you can minimise that damage early on by investing cash elsewhere, then good luck to you.
Yep, no, fair enough too. Look, as a reference point, if you are considering taking him on or need some, something to move you over to the starting Macrae camp. Round 1, they take on Collingwood. For a reference point, last time he played them, he got 180 in AFL Fantasy and a 148 in SuperCoach. Round 2 takes on Carlton. Last time he played them was a 140 in AFL Fantasy and just a lazy 150 in SuperCoach. Then it gets interesting. He comes up against GWS. Does he get the tag of Matt DeBoer? I think it's more likely to be Bontempelli, but the last time...
I think Bont or Dunks even would seem more likely. Someone who's a little more damaging.
I think so too. The last time he played was in a final, in the elimination final. It was a 129 in AFL Fantasy and a 116 in SuperCoach. So he's certainly going okay from that perspective in terms of those opening 3 rounds of the year, even with a potential Matty DeBoer tag heading in near him. I think he's going to be a nice option, whether you choose to start him, and if you choose to upgrade him, good luck. I hope you can get him when you need to. Let's talk about where he goes in a drafts, Jimmy. This is much more your area of specialty. It seems to be... you're perfectly fine at the other formats, by the way. It seems to be a general consensus, rightly or wrongly, that Grundy's is the first round, first picked off the board in every format. Macrae, is he a pick 2 no matter the format, or could he slide a little bit in some of the other formats?
No, look, for me at this point, it's pick 1 is Grundy. Pick 2 is Whitfield, certainly in Fantasy and DreamTeam.
Okay.
And then Macrae is 3.
Yep.
Whether you really want him or not, I think he still probably should be pick 3. And if for no other reason than trade value.
Yeah.
When he does go on that run, he can go on a run like few others. And even if you don't want to finish the year with him, if you've got the opportunity to start the year with him in a draft, I think you need to. because at some point you'll be able to trade him for a very nice upgrade on a couple of other lines if that's what it comes to. So I think that's a pretty easy equation. SuperCoach, I think you could make an argument for perhaps one or two other mids to be in that bracket.
Yeah, sure.
With him, your Dangers and Fifes and whatnot, but in a dream team or an ultimate footy style draft, I think Macrae's pick 3.
Yep.
There's no real question on that for mine.
No, I totally agree with you. If you're sitting pick 4 with an AFL fantasy scoring format in a draft, you're not getting Macrae. SuperCoach, he might slide a little bit. Someone might jump early on a Maxi Gawn and get him inside the first couple of selections. We talked about the potential of him being, yesterday in the 50 most relevant, a potential number 2 pick in a SuperCoach draft as well. So there's a bit more chance you might get him, pick 3, 4, 5, or maybe even 6 in a SuperCoach draft. But let's be honest, he is a top-tier first-round selection no matter the format you choose to play.
Absolutely.
All right, mate, appreciate your thoughts today on Jackson Macrae.
No worries, mate. Good fun. Thank you.
If you want to go and check out the article on him, it is available online now for you at coachespanel.tv, as is all the other players were revealed so far in the 50 most relevant. There is a ton of them through there. All of our pre-season watch lists, some ultimate footy draft strategies, and a whole heap of other content is available over at coachespanel.tv. Just 3 players left to go in the 50 most relevant, and tomorrow, an absolute monster that you will want in your team. Whether to start or upgrade? Nah, you want to start him.